Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with legendary Canadian jazz guitarist Lorne Lofsky. We talked to him about his latest 2021 CD, This Song Is New. He is well known as a former member of the Oscar Peterson Quartet, giving the world his first studio album in nearly 25 years. Born, raised, and based in Toronto, he has performed at venues all over the world, from Carnegie Hall to the Montreal Jazz Festival, gigging with the likes of Dizzy Gillespie, Ray Brown, Benny Carter, Dave Holland, Rosemary, Clooney, and Clark Terry. Get to know him and dig this interview.
Thanks for taking a minute out.
Oh, my pleasure, man.
The song is new. Talk to me a little bit about having an album coming out during a pandemic. What are your feelings on the timing of this and just kind of what's going on the planet right now?
Oh, you mean in this new abnormal?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty strange. Well, initially the recording was, it was done in very late, it was done December 28th, 2019, and basically what happened was I wrote a few tunes and then I rearranged some jazz standards, and I got together with some friends and musical partners of about 40 years, some dear friends of mine. They're all amazing players and great friends. And anyway, we got together at a friend of mine's recording studio. His name is Roberto Acapinti. He has a studio. He has a record label called Modica Music. We went in basically just to run down some of these tunes of mine to get a feel for them. So basically it was a rehearsal kind of. And Roberto said, well, while you guys are running it down, I'll record it. Then you could listen back and, figure out if you want to change anything or if you want to use it for a demo to get some funding to do some recording in the future, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, yeah, cool. So we just played. Most of the tunes were first takes by and large. And anyway, we laid it down. I heard it back a bit, and then I sat on it for a while, like people typically do. And then a couple months later, COVID came in, and I listened to it after having not heard it for a while. I listened to it, and I heard quite a lot of positive music there. So I thought, in light of the COVID situation and people being locked down and not being able to get together, I thought, I'm gonna put this out, and that's sort of how it came about. So it is definitely a jazz record in that we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants. So there's some interesting moments there. Yeah, like I said, during the COVID thing, there's nothing going on. Everything's like on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever. You can't, the whole playing thing it's been totally compromised. So, so it was an album that was, released during the pandemic, and, I'm hoping people will enjoy it. So, in a nutshell.
What do you miss the most about that old world back in March that you're looking forward to getting back to?
Well, I love playing with musicians, and I'd like to go back to work and play a bit. The scene up in the Toronto area hasn't been great the last few years. It's been okay. But, it's getting together with people, not even necessarily to play for people, but just getting together with peers and colleagues and being able to engage in the same room as opposed to, trying these computer programs that, sort of deal with latency to a certain degree, but it's not the same. There's no substitute for being with people and interacting, socially and musically. Because, music is, especially jazz, it's primarily an interactive art form. People do solo things, of course, but the vast bulk of it is people playing with other people and really sort of engaging in like a common goal and having fun together, And so that's the thing that I miss the most, I practice all the time at home and I'm always learning things, but that whole thing about, interacting with people and being able to hang out, it's a very important part of the whole culture of music in general. So, yeah.
We all realize about this long time away from music, both musician and the audience.
Well, again, too, you notice, I'm sure you've noticed, too, that, like, everybody is posting videos of themselves playing and even posting older videos of themselves playing. Maybe that's in part because people, I don't know, they don't want to be forgotten, or they're trying to keep some semblance of, like, a musical scene alive, but it's all through video and audio now as opposed to the live thing, so. But, there is a connection for sure between artists and their audiences. There's a definite energy that one gets, when you play live. and I'm not referring to applause or anything like that, but just the fact that they're hearing the music unfold right when you do. It's sort of like I sometimes think about jazz music as being, when you're listening to a show and all of a sudden you hear this little weird, beep, beep, beep or something, and they say, this just in, like news bulletin, news flash. To me, jazz music is always like these bulletins that are happening one after the other. In other words, if you're playing live, the audience is sort of having access to these news flashes just when you do. When you all of a sudden get an idea and you play it, you're playing it on the fly, and those people are hearing it when that's happening too. So there's this real sense of immediacy. When you hear a record, you're hearing a documentation of something that's already happened. But when you hear it live, you can't substitute recorded music for the immediacy and the impact of live playing. There's a huge difference, I think, anyway. Yeah.
So how did this music journey begin for you? How did you kind of fall into music, kind of your childhood, some of your influences?
Oh, well, initially, I sort of grew up, I was born in 1954, so I grew up, like, listening to the Beatles and and onward from there. And then I discovered guitar at the age of 11, and then I wanted to be a guitar god. When I was a teenager, I sort of tried to mimic Eric Clapton, Johnny Winter, and Jimmy Page, and Hendrix, and people like that. And then some friends played me a Miles Davis recording, Kind of Blue. And then I just thought, wow, this is amazing. I had no idea what I was hearing, but there was something about it that really kind of grabbed me. And that sort of started my musical journey. And I guess I was around 16 or 17. And then I started getting into jazz and going out to some local jazz clubs and really getting into it and taking a few lessons. And then I studied music at university for a couple of years. And I'm kind of a practiceaholic, so I've just spent many, many hours and many, many years working on things and listening to records, and I guess through a lot of determination and a lot of hard work, I wound up having some incredible opportunities through the years, playing with Oscar Peterson and the great Ed Bickert, who was one of my mentors on guitar, one of the greatest jazz guitarists ever, and Chet Baker and a whole bunch of other people. So it's been a great journey, and it's, I guess in part, those opportunities, sometimes some of it's timing and some of it is, people sort of, recognize whatever skill set you happen to have, and they want to, they want to hire you or play music with you, so it's been a great ride so far, and, I've been very fortunate. I've learned a lot, and I'm continuing to learn daily. Actually, just before this phone call, I was working on a beautiful standard tune, Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most, which is very apropos right now.
Yeah. But
yeah, so it's a work in progress, This whole thing. Anybody that's on an artistic journey, whether it's dance, whether it's art, if it's photography, you're always learning, and everything that you're doing it's hopefully constantly evolving, and that's the great thing about it. Nobody has it totally together. I bet if Bill Evans, rest his soul, was still around, he'd still be searching for things to do, so it's like that, so the journey starts, and then it kind of stops, I guess, when you take your last breath, whenever that is. So it's a great ride,
Indeed. So talk to me a little bit about, you've been around Oscar Peterson and some really big names and legends and luminaries. What did you learn from these big names that you in turn have taught other people? What did they give you that you in turn have given to younger players?
Well, quite a few things. One is the importance of sort of being very focused when you play, playing with a real sense of deliberation and commitment and intent. And, the idea of when you're playing, don't phone it in, don't go on autopilot, try different things, be professional, take care of business, be prepared. I'll give you an example. When Oscar Peterson hired me for the gig, he asked me to come to his house to rehearse. right? So I showed up with my guitar and amp. We hung out, had some coffee in his kitchen, and he had a stack of CDs there. And I said, "Do you want to play a bit?" He says, "No, here's a bunch of CDs," and he had a piece of paper with a list of tunes from those CDs, and he said, "I just want you to go home and learn these." So I went home and I learned them, and he was very, very impressed. Actually, after our first tour, he wrote me a lovely letter. It was complimentary, just sort of commending me for my, for the effort that I put in learning his repertoire and stuff, And so yeah, that's a good lesson to that I try and impart to my students. I said, get your stuff together, work on your stuff. Make sure that you're trying to play whenever possible at the top of your game. Lord knows it doesn't always happen, but you want to try and really give it your best shot at all times, and continue to study. Like don't stop. Keep developing. I mean, all those people did. And as a matter of fact, when Oscar, after he had a stroke and he came back, his left hand was quite compromised, obviously, because it's a physical condition. And so I did a lot of the comping for him. But he wound up, but his right hand was incredible, and he still played these things that were really beautiful. They weren't the Oscar of old because he was a different Oscar, but so he tried to keep evolving and sort of was working with what he was doing at the time. And I admire so many musicians for like really continuing to develop. Ed Bickert's another example. Jim Hall's another example. People that just keep developing. So, and I try and get that across to the students. I also try, a lot of young jazz students these days, they don't seem to be all that big on learning like the Great American Songbook as much as learning sort of new, jazz standards from whoever their heroes are, which is great. But I always tell them, you've got to go back to the source, and you've got to listen to all the giants, like all the people that are playing actively. There's a great expression, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. And it's true. I mean, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing if other people didn't come first and sort of throw down the gauntlet, So that's another thing I try and tell the students. I said, check all the people out on different instruments, not just your own instrument, and if you're a piano player, go back and listen to Bud Powell. Chick Corea was hugely influenced by Bud Powell. Bill Evans was. I mean, a host of people were. And so, the students have to go back and they've got to like really check out what's come before their current favorites, see where this music is, how it's developed. And that'll really give them a very strong foundation for moving forward. So that's something I learned too from playing with all those heavyweights.
What have you seen over the years that you've been in jazz? What developments have you seen that's been reassuring to you that shows that jazz is moving in a very positive evolutionary pace forward?
Well, I mean, I've heard some. I mean, I've got fairly wide parameters when it comes to musical taste, and I'm sort of open to anything. I've heard. Well, I mean, I've heard some really fantastic things that are very thought-provoking, and some interesting sort of like hybrids of jazz. And I don't mean like jazz fusion, like when you take funk and then you take a few altered scale licks and put it together, and all of a sudden it's jazz rock. But different cultures. There's an great musician. He's been around for years now, named Lionel Lewicki. He's playing with Herbie Hancock, and I think he played with Wayne Shorter. He sings and he plays, and he's from. Where's it from? Benin, I think. He did a clinic at this university I teach at, and he there's a great example of somebody that's really moving the music forward. It's all improvised, and he's taking music from African cultures and different rhythms, and he's also adding in. He said he studied bebop when he was much younger, so he's sort of embracing a whole. Like a real cross-section of different influences based on his upbringing, and then based on other things that he heard from, like Western music, i.e. bebop and various things related. So I'm seeing, I'm seeing an interesting kind of, as you say, like an evolution in jazz. I mean, if you ask 12 different people what jazz is, you'd probably get 12 different definitions. Or if you said to someone, name some jazz musicians. Again, some people, you'd get a very, very wide cross-section of names. And I think that's a good thing. I think the music, anything has to evolve and it has to develop. So I think from that standpoint, the music is still definitely moving forward and it's expanding. And I find that very encouraging, because we don't want this music to, as soon as it stops developing, I think it'll atrophy, it'll die. So the idea that it is still developing is, I find that very encouraging, and it gives me, it also gives me reasons to go to my guitar and want to keep practicing. I'll give you an example. Like, I'm so into practicing and developing that sometimes when I hear a recording or I see a video, sometimes I don't even watch it or listen to it, to its conclusion. I'll get some ideas and then I'll go to my guitar. And I won't want to try and emulate what I'm hearing, but I'll try and build on what I'm hearing, or try to find something inside myself that might already be there waiting to come out that was triggered by the music that I heard. And I think that's one of the greatest things about art is that it even though what you're seeing is external, what it does is it triggers internal things, and then you go on kind of a voyage of, like a voyage of self-discovery, in that you tap into yourself and you find things that were actually there, and they were sort of latent, and then hearing something brings something out in your playing that you didn't even know existed. So that's happening more and more because there's more and more different things happening, things to check out. So I think things are quite healthy in many ways.
Without a doubt. So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, that you're ultimately living your life. Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? Well, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I'm a very inquisitive individual, and like I said, I'm one of my main reasons for living is like to play music, and to me, it's. I'm an individual. Like I said, I'm on a mission. I'm sort of on a journey. I'm trying to develop to my full potential on a daily basis, and by just exposing myself to different types of music, and then trying to kind of internalize different influences and then use them in different ways at different times. It's making me, I'm hoping, a more open individual, a wiser individual, also a more sensitive individual. Well, like anybody, when you see something on the internet that's very heartwarming, it really has a very positive effect on me, and it stays with me. And I try and bring those feelings. I try and recall those feelings on a daily basis, and try and use those feelings to help me be a more giving, open, and empathic individual. And playing jazz is something that certainly strengthens those things, because when you play music, you've got to be open to the moment. If you're playing with people, you've got to be open to what they're saying. You have to embrace what they're saying, react to it, like, musically converse with them, and so on. So those are some of the qualities that I kind of aspire to. And I'm very fortunate in that being a musician is a way to help me kind of get in touch with those feelings, and develop them, and use them as sort of guiding principles in my life. So that's the goal anyway.
Beautiful. Hey, man, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. This has been illuminating. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Toronto, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Lorne for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.